I got you.
All right, and we are live. Welcome everybody to Lubbock Compact Live for Wednesday, August 18th. We are back again. I am your host, Adam Hernandez, here with my co-host, Dr. Nick Bergfeld, and we do have a special guest back with us who's been with us before, Mr. Chad Wheeler with Open Door, and so you'll want to stick around and hear what he's going to talk about. And so I guess we'll first kick it off with our updates.
Yeah, so in terms of city, really the major news update here, and then we'll talk about a lot of just inspiring community events that have happened over the past week. But the big news here in Lubbock when it comes to policy has been around the near universal support for the city of Lubbock or for the West Texas region to play a role in housing Afghan refugees as part of the crisis that is now happening within Afghanistan. We've had congressmen such as Jody Arrington voice support, and people just sort of across the spectrum coming out and say that there is a moral obligation for our community to do right by individuals that, by all accounts, took enormous risks to participate in the U.S. intervention in Afghanistan at cost to their families and their own lives. And so it's been inspiring to see those developments. I really hope that as a community, the city of Lubbock pursues a policy of refugee resettlement that our sister city does. And so Amarillo, while they don't talk about this, quietly has been one of the largest housers of refugee resettlement, not just in Texas, but in the nation. They have, at some periods in time, have had one of the highest per capita resettlement rates in the nation. And so, it's not West Texas. We have that hospitality. It's not like communities haven't done that before. And it seems like there's momentum building around for the city of Lubbock to potentially participate this as well. And so it's just been, I think, a really great sign. I'm very encouraged by that and to see sort of the unified voices that are coming together to talk about this.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. And I really hope that Lubbock does follow suit. I couldn't imagine. I've been through some things in my life, as we all have, but I could not imagine having gone through what those folks have gone through. And at the end of the day, they helped, however you felt about that whole situation in Afghanistan for the last 20 years, they did help us.
Right.
And they did definitely risk their lives and their families' lives. And so, I just feel like we have to do right by them, same way that we need to do right by our own troops as well.
Yeah. And so, the state of Texas, we're going to initially, Fort Bliss near El Paso is going to be one of the first housing locations for refugees that are coming to the U.S. They're expected to have about 10,000 there. And in just what are called the SIV visas, so these are the special ones that were given out to Afghan translators or individuals who worked with the U.S. military or military contractors. There are tens of thousands of these. And so I think it's important across the United States, and especially in our region where we have so many military veterans per capita. This is such a proud military history in our community. And a lot of them are speaking out on this issue and saying that we need to do the right thing. And so I think it's been a really great moment here just locally in terms of people's desire to see that change. So that's really sort of the major news that I think on the policy side, but there's been a lot of community energy and a lot of community events that have happened recently. And Adam, you were heavily involved in I think, of what is almost an unprecedented event in East Lubbock this past weekend, the back to school reunion. I'm curious if you could talk about that. And
yeah. So we had an interesting time that morning on the 14th. And so this was this past Saturday, the 14th. The event was supposed to start with the parade at 9 a.m. As I'm sure most of you know, it was raining like crazy the entire night before. The radar was saying that the rain was going to clear out by 8 a.m., which we felt like would still, let us pull off the parade. Of course, in the morning, it was still heavily going at 7:30, approaching 8 o'clock in the morning. And it wasn't going to let up till about 10. So that caused us to cancel the parade part. There was just no way to pull it off. We would have literally had everybody standing out in a parking lot getting poured down with rain trying to make a parade happen. And then who was going to watch the parade because people weren't going to be standing out in the rain. So that threw a big wrench in our plans to start off with. And so we rushed down to the park, not me, but some of the team rushed down to the park to see what the condition of the park was, because it had been raining all night and there was flood advisories in certain areas and things of that nature. Found out that everything we were supposed to have in the actual park could not be placed there because it was too wet and muddy. We had secured the electricity to use the electricity station there in the park, but the city of Lubbock would not turn it on because of the liability. It was just too wet. And so we had to, in about an hour and a half, across the whole park, with us going back and forth trying to discuss and collaborate and then get everybody moved and reorganized all in under an hour and a half, which happened, by the way. It was amazing to see. Nobody really lost their head. Everybody was just in it to win it. I mean, and determined to make the rest of the event happen, because the parade was a nice thing and we definitely wanted to do that. But the bulk of it was the giving away the backpacks, the resource fair, the vaccinations, and the free food. I mean, we had almost 1,000 pounds, maybe even a little over 1,000 pounds of meat that we were dead set on feeding folks with, and trying to feed as many folks as we could. But we got it all together by 10 a.m. Everything else started, minus a few of the things that we just weren't able to pull off because the participants had to back out because of how everything was unfolding. And then so for instance, like the live performances, a lot of those folks had actual equipment, which cost thousands of dollars. Right. They didn't, not knowing what the weather was going to do is not something they wanted to particularly participate in. And so, outside of that, we still had the resource fair, went off without a hitch. We got LISD and Lubbock Partnership Network moved closer to the May Simmons Community Center. So everybody was pretty much centrally located there. LPD and all of that was still happening. The COVID vaccination wagon was still happening. Food still happened. So we ended up giving out, it was a little over 1,400 backpacks. So nearly 1,500 backpacks were given out completely. No backpacks left at all. The food fed just about everybody that showed up, which there was around 2,000 people that came out there today. The food fed just about everybody that didn't leave, and except for some of the team members who just pushed through, were there from early in the morning and pouring rain to the very end, cleaning up. Some of those folks never did get to eat. But outside of that, as far as all the attendees got fed, it was a wonderful time. People were just congregating and seeing folks they hadn't seen in a lot of years. 32 people ended up getting vaccinated at the COVID vaccination station. And from what I understand, 15 of those were the minimum age of 12. And so we got some school kids vaccinated in the process. And so overall, a great success by everybody's account. So yeah, it was really great, and just really proud of everybody that came together. I mean, there was hundreds of people that donated, that volunteered time, that gave food, everything. And so just so proud of the entire community and Lubbock at large. This wasn't only the East Lubbock community. A lot of folks from the community, of course, helped with this, but we had so much help from other areas.
Yeah. And to me, I think that's something that really stands out, when seeing how much energy there was. And I love this event on so many levels. I mean, having the opportunity for vaccinations on site, being able to have this outside and outdoors, to take advantage of the fact that we do have these wide open spaces here in Lubbock, and then just to see that level of community spirit. Individuals who are coming together truly for a back to school reunion, and the amount of just conversations and reconnecting and dialogue and meeting people's neighbors. I can't think of, growing up in Lubbock, I can't think of anything that really compares to that, and I'd love to see that type of solidarity. And I think it speaks volumes to the depth of that commitment to see something like this developing in East Lubbock, in a community that oftentimes has to do a lot with a lot less than everyone else, and has really sort of always been in an uphill climb when it comes to attracting city investment into the community, and being able to make sure that they have the right facilities and amenities to attract families and to see that energy, right? And I think for so many people, they think, what could possibly be out there? What is it? There's a lot of Lubbock citizens that never go across the interstate.
Yeah.
And so to see these photos on social media and the turnout, and I think some of the drone footage just got, somebody posted some of that the other day. Incredible, and I think about what it's doing to show other Lubbock communities what's possible, right? The kind of community energy and togetherness that is still possible today.
Yeah. And I do have to, before we move on to the next topic, I do have to give a special shout out to the ladies mostly ladies, there was men, but mostly ladies, all of the people who put together the resource fair and who managed that. With all of those people, that line never stopped moving. There was about 43 agencies. And so the idea here was, this was all in the May Simmons Community Center. And so the folks would go in and they would get a punch card, right? And so they only had to stop at 10 stations to get resources for 10 stations. And we had it that way because we wanted to make sure that these resources were getting to the people, that people weren't just coming to grab a backpack and just, running off. And so that was kind of the stipulation. You go through, you get your 10 punch card, your 10 punches, and then you can get your backpacks. Well, folks were actually taking the time to stop at every single resource table versus just trying to do the bare minimum of 10. It was just overwhelmingly encouraging, but just the way that those ladies ran that, it was mind blowing. I wasn't able to go through there the whole entire day, but I did go through there couple of times when it was at the thickest part of it and then towards the end, and from beginning to end, that thing just ran smoothly. We didn't have anybody complaining about waiting in a long line or anything of that nature. It was just, and then even with the food, those ladies were just, it was like an assembly line. People were just going through there. There was a couple of times we had to wait on meat to finish, but we got everybody fed. Everything kept moving. It was just, it's just unprecedented. I have never seen anything like that in all of my years living in East Lubbock. And we've had some pretty big Juneteenths in the past. But this was just something different. And a lot of the community leaders were saying the same thing that we were feeling, which is that this is just the beginning. And it's, as kind of crazy as it kind of, got started off because of the weather, this is really the start of something much bigger in not only in East Lubbock, but just across Lubbock in general. Wow.
And so do you think this kind of event, do you think other parts of Lubbock that they could do things like this, that's something that's possible?
Yeah, not only is it possible, this is something that I think they should do. Another great place to do something like this that would be perfect for it is the Maggie Trejo Supercenter. And they have a huge piece of property there. I know that when they did this last neighborhood night out, that there was at least about 500 people, and that park was not even full.
Right. It's a beautiful park.
That was maybe half full, maybe. So you can fit much more people on there. Not to mention the center itself is rather large. And so that would be another great place. I know that in Central Lubbock, for instance, they have the YWCA building that's here on University. Huge building, huge parking lot.
I love that.
Yeah. So, there's, I'm not really familiar with venues in South and West Lubbock, but I'm sure that there's, others out there. And that's really just kind of what you need, a big building so that you can have folks, be able to go inside, go through the resource thing. And then just a large outside area. We had bouncers and things of that nature, barbecue and things of that nature. And so, this is something that not only can be done, it should be done in other neighborhoods and other communities.
I hope that happens. My hope is that when people saw just simply how much engagement there was in social media, my hope now is that there are a lot of folks throughout the city who are thinking about, next year, how can we have something like this? Because I think this idea of having it around the kids and having it as this idea of reunion, I think it really reinforces the importance of our schools as well at the same time. And so I just think there's a lot of great elements that came out of this.
Yeah, and LISD was there in attendance. They were with the Lubbock Partnership Network, and all educators. The president of it, the principal of Escado was out there.
Oh.
And they were all about it, and they did an excellent job. They loved it. Yeah, they really loved it. Yeah.
Oh, and so then there's been a couple other community events, pretty quiet in City Hall, but some neighborhood events that you've been able to attend. And just sort of curious, what were you seeing over the past week, and what has been the dialogue?
Yeah, so I've been to basically the other events I've been to were just neighborhood association meetings. So I've been to the Chapman Hill neighborhood association meeting. This was right before the back to school bash. I've been to this week I've been to the Guadalupe Neighborhood Association meeting, as well as I just came from today, the North Lubbock Neighborhood Association meeting. And so a lot of good things going on there. What we're hearing that's a big issue for a lot of folks, and this is in pretty much every neighborhood association I'm going to, is code enforcement. Some form of something going on with code enforcement. And we are seeing your comments on Facebook. If you do have comments, or if you have questions, don't hesitate to put those in there.
Yeah, please. Yeah,
and we will definitely see those. So yeah, code enforcement is a big thing, as far as like the biggest one we've heard about is yards not being cut. And so there's a lot of information there of why that's taking so long. And the short story of it is that there's a big shortage on contractors. So there is a bit of a barrier to that. But what I just decided as I was at the North Lubbock Neighborhood Association meeting just right before this, Stuart Walker is the director of codes, and he was the one out there talking. And so they were asking him, what is the process to be a contractor? What does that look like? And so basically you would need, if you're just by yourself, right? If you have a mower or whatever, you're just by yourself, you have to have, or regardless, whatever company it is, has to have liability insurance up to $500,000. So I'm going to find out, because I know when people hear that, they think, "Oh, I need $500,000."
Right, exactly.
Which is not what you need.
It's really intimidating.
Right. It's generally just like some sort of monthly charge, like any other kind of insurance you would have. But I do want to find out, what is the cost of that? How do you go about getting that? The other part of it is, if you have a crew, you do have to have workman's comp. And so I want to see what is the process for that, so that I can help folks, because what we're trying to do, or what I've been kind of trying to do by asking them questions and learning out about the process, is try to help folks to fill those positions, because this is an opportunity for folks to make some money. And there's different, he broke it down today. There's different prices, but basically everything's about $30 to $35 per each thing that you do. So whether it be a front yard, backyard, alley, they also have a situation where, let's say you go to cut an alley and you come across, a bunch of stuff. You have to do a bunch of handwork before you do it. You can actually stop right there. You can call them out there. They'll go out there and actually negotiate a price with you.
Wow.
And he did say that, if you do have all that stuff in order and you become a contractor, let's say you cut a yard, you are paid you're paid in about a week. And so wouldn't be a good, wouldn't be a bad, even small business for somebody to put together if they were so motivated to do that. So that's a big thing. And so if you haven't had some yard next to you cut or things of that nature, there's reasons for that. Code enforcement is just really understaffed. Another thing, just for folks listening out there, that we found out in this meeting, and then we can go on to our guest, is solid waste is actually only about 50% staffed right now.
Wow.
So if you have a CDL, or if that's something that you're interested in, or you know somebody that would be interested in getting a CDL, I don't know the process to get a CDL, but it's much like getting just a regular license. There may just be some extra paperwork and some extra, qualifications or something, but you just go down to the DPS and that's where you would get a CDL. So, you can ask them what that process looks like. But again, I mean, that's a lot of opportunity for folks who may need a job or who may want a better job, because a job with the city, believe it or not, is not a bad
right.
gig.
Yeah, good benefits.
Yeah. And so, lots of stuff going on in the neighborhood associations, but those were kind of the things that were sticking out overall that I think most folks can use right now.
Nice. And then the last sort of quick update. We finally have information on when the city's listening session will be for the American Rescue Plan dollars. So this was something that the city council said that they would put together, where citizen input could be had around how the $56 million the city of Lubbock is about to receive, or we've already received half of it. And so this event is the 24th. So it's Tuesday, the 24th at 1 p.m. at City Hall. So this is going to be a listening session. Now, one of the challenges here is that the city budget that's already come out, the council has already allocated about half of the total amount of American Rescue Plan dollars that we're going to get. So this listening session is a bit late in terms of the decision making, but it is an opportunity for citizens to at least voice how they feel about what the city has already decided they want to do with the dollars. Or possibly what the other half of these dollars could be used for. So we'll keep watching that, but those are all the city updates for the week.
Yeah, well, we'll go ahead and bring our guest on, Mr. Chad Wheeler with Open Door. And he is here we've had you on once before, Chad, and thanks for being back with us today. You are giving us an update on kind of the situation with folks experiencing homelessness here in Lubbock, and some different things surrounding that. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, and I'm excited to have this conversation because I think a lot of people in Lubbock, as we started to see our COVID numbers decrease and our vaccination numbers increase, we thought this was over, right? That we were kind of cresting out and Lubbock had broken free, and we were going to sort of move forward as a community and as an economy. And over these past, month or so, we've started to see these numbers just really spike in dramatic ways with the Delta variant. And simultaneously, a lot of sort of the government programs to prevent people from falling through the social safety net have started to end. And I think a lot of folks have been wondering just, what has happened in those pieces. And then also, we've never had a conversation about, what was the impact of all these federal dollars that came into Lubbock? In terms of where'd they go and what did they get used for, and how are going forward as we talk about American Rescue Plan, how some of these dollars could be used to resolve the issue of homelessness in Lubbock.
Definitely. Yeah, those are some pretty big topics. I think, it's going to probably take years for us to really understand where this money is going and where it ends up. But I think, it's a very important conversation for us to have. One, where is the best place to put these funds, and what are the best uses of the funds that are available? I mean, those are really important questions that communities need to be wrestling with right now. And unfortunately, in the madness of it all, and really, and I've got some numbers to share with you tonight, the enormous amount of funding that has been made available to communities. I think that we're going to find, and we were mentioning earlier that in my perspective, years from now, people are going to be writing books about how poorly things were managed, and how funding ended up in the wrong places and corruption was present. And I just think the environment is ripe for a lot of challenging things to get done well. And so, that makes it all the more important for us to have these kind of conversations and be aware and try to provide accountability to our communities, and the administrators of these funds to make sure that they are actually serving their purposes and their intended purposes, and meeting needs that are really going to make Lubbock a better place for everybody, and especially the people that are most vulnerable that these funds are really targeting. So let me start, and I'm going to share my screen because I have a lot of fun things I think you'll want to see. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, the point in time count for, I didn't realize. Yeah.
So, and just a reminder real quick, Chad, for everybody watching, if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to put those in the Facebook comments, and then we'll either answer them or shift those over to Chad. So go ahead, Chad. Sorry.
Awesome. Yeah, and I can't see those comments, so just let me know if anything comes up that we need to pause and talk about. So before we get into kind of the funding that's available, and I want to spend the bulk of our time talking about the funding sources and kind of what's going on there. But I just wanted to provide this because I don't think that many people have seen this snapshot.
Right.
This data was released in the middle of this year. And you'll see, the 4 columns there, 2021, 2020, 19, 18. One caveat to this, and you'll see at the top, that is sheltered count only. So this is the annual HUD point in time count that communities across the country participate in and report these numbers to HUD, and that helps communities understand what the scope of homelessness looks like in our communities. Also helps federal funders allocate funding to where it's needed most and kind of identify trends and things like that. So because of COVID, a lot of communities, including Lubbock, changed the way that we were doing unsheltered counts, just because there's a lot of potential for exposure with people who are out and about in different places. And with shelters, I mean, people are there to begin with, so they're able to keep track of a lot of that information. So you'll see our sheltered numbers went up a little bit in 2020. It's still less than it was in 2018. Most of those are adults. Some of those are children and young children. And I'll tell you that all of those children, well, I guess because we're looking at the sheltered view only, but usually when we're looking at the sheltered and unsheltered, we have to kind of qualify that all of our kids are, in almost every year that we've ever done this, our kids are always in sheltered locations. We're very rarely in Texas, and almost never, I can't say that I've ever seen it where we have had kids counted in unsheltered locations in Texas or in Lubbock, which is a really good thing. Homelessness is terrible to begin with, but unsheltered homelessness is more vulnerable, than being in a shelter. And if kids are going to be in homelessness, we'd rather have them in a safe place with support, that kind of thing. So it's hard to walk away with a lot of really quality observations from this count, in part because it is sheltered only, and we know that there is, usually around half or a little bit less of people in communities that might be in literal homelessness and unsheltered locations. So I kind of wanted to give a snapshot here, in part to say one of the things that I hear often, and I imagine you do as well, is the way people talk about homelessness in Lubbock. One of the things that I hear a lot is, man, homelessness has just gotten so bad and the numbers have gotten so big and they're just increasing all the time. And, whatever criticisms people may have about the point in time count or any other data source, there is no data source that I'm aware of that shows that homelessness is increasing in Lubbock. And I mean, this is a tiny increase in sheltered people here. But, the idea that homelessness is just booming in Lubbock, there's just no evidence of it. And I would just put this out here for anybody. This is the challenge to the public, to any naysayers, to any opponents, whatever. If you're frustrated about homelessness and you think homelessness is booming, give me a call, come by my office, and let's drive around downtown Lubbock and let's drive around South and North Overton and up and down Q, and let's invite the Lubbock Police Department Homeless Outreach Team as well, and let's identify where these people are, because I drive through this neighborhood and this area every single day, and from my observation, from the data, from conversations with other providers, homelessness has been decreasing in Lubbock over the last 5 years. And that's something that I'm proud of, that I know a lot of us in Lubbock are proud of. That's what we want to accomplish, is helping people exit homelessness and return to housing, and then also prevent homelessness on the front end from people entering the system. So if I'm wrong, please come help me understand how I'm wrong. But this, I think, is a helpful thing to look at. 187 people on any given night in our emergency shelters. If you compare that to a lot of cities, including Amarillo, comparable size, mid-size Texas cities, homelessness is a relatively small issue. Another thing I really want to point out, and I want everybody to think about, is that say I'm a business owner or I'm anybody driving down the street and I see a guy with a shopping cart loaded with belongings sitting in front of my business or sitting on the street corner. That can create a major impression on me. I mean, I can see that and think, wow, this is very present. It's right here in the public eye, and I'm seeing one person. Tonight, Open Door has 77 chronically homeless people, formerly chronically homeless people, in permanent housing. No one driving around Lubbock and no business owners can look and see those 77 people that are now in housing. And so, I think it's really important for us to think about, even one person in homelessness is super visible. The progress that we're making as a community in helping people exit homelessness is invisible. You really can't see it, but it truly, I'm convinced it's truly happening in our community. And so that maybe is a conversation for another day and in some other ways, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to kind of draw that.
And I think that's very insightful. And thank you for, I actually hadn't even looked at the point in time count for 2021. And to see these numbers, I think honestly, it allays a lot of fears that people had around just sort of seeing, as you mentioned, I've heard a lot of conversations about, it's gotten so bad, and there's something new about it that we hadn't seen before, things like that. But when I talk to practitioners, the only things that I hear and see are progress of being able to find ways and social support to allow for people to come out of experiencing homelessness. And so now I'm very thankful that you were able to provide an update on this.
Yeah, no doubt. There's still a lot of work to be done, but we are making progress. Absolutely. Okay, so I want to talk about the relief funding that's available. I think without kind of getting way too much in the weeds, I think these are things that the average citizen doesn't know a whole lot about, and the news is definitely not covering these very well. It's very complicated stuff to even understand. So what I want to do is spend just a little bit of time kind of giving you the very easy to understand version of a lot of this. There are other programs that have been created to assist people in various ways. Some that are more kind of dedicated to people in homelessness, some that are kind of more general, people experiencing financial hardship or whatever. These four are not entirely focused, not all of them are entirely focused on homelessness, but these are four that I think are some of the biggest resources that can benefit people in homelessness and people at risk of homelessness as well. So I want to go through kind of each of these. I'm going to show you kind of a snapshot of funding, what Lubbock has received or is in the process of receiving, and kind of what they can be used for, who's administering them, how they can be used, how that's going, that kind of thing. So the first one is Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and there's kind of 1 and 2 distributions of those funds, but I've kind of just got them combined here. Nationally, this is a massive
Right.
fund that is designed to help pay for rent and arrears, so rent that is past due, rent from previous months, the same with utilities and other housing expenses. And Lubbock, the city of Lubbock, through the Community Development Department, has received $14 million, or is in the process of receiving $14 million for this. This is an enormous amount of funding, and I can't stress enough, this is unprecedented. The City of Lubbock Community Development Department has never managed this size of funding, which is a concern we'll get back to, but lots of funding available for people to prevent eviction, to pay for rent, that kind of thing. Don't want to move too far without mentioning where people can go to access these funds, because they are still available. They are very much still available today. In Texas, texasrentrelief.com. You can go to the City of Lubbock Community Development Department website for an application. Lubbock County's website has applications as well. Those are two separate funding sources, and actually three separate funding sources that anybody in Lubbock can apply for. This is from texasrentrelief.com, just to kind of give you an overview of who qualifies and what this funding is for. Again, it's for past due rent, current and up to 2 months of expected rent costs, past due utilities and home energy expenses. And then you can also reapply for an additional 3 months of assistance if funds are available. So in Lubbock County, if you have a household of 5 people, then your income limit is $60,850. So there are plenty of families in Lubbock who are making less than $60,000 a year with 5 household members. And if you drop that down to 1 household member, it's $39,000 is the income threshold. So if you make less than $39,000 a year as an individual, you do qualify for this. You can qualify for this relief. Kind of the 4 big questions. Is your rent less than $4,600 a month? In Lubbock, Texas, I hope it is.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
If you have a past due utility notice, past due rent notice, or eviction notice, and if you do not receive this assistance, it would put you in an unsafe or unhealthy living environment, like a shared living situation or emergency shelter. And then if, and all of this is self-reporting, has anyone in the household experienced any of these financial impacts related to COVID-19, like a reduction of or loss of income, increased expenses, qualified for unemployment benefits? This funding and these qualifications are intended to make it fairly easy for people to access these funds. It's designed not to create an enormous amount of hoops to jump through and difficulty for people. So let's talk about how this money has been spent. So this is pulled from the most current data that's available through the end of June that Lubbock, City of Lubbock Community Development Department has to report, the Lubbock County has to report, Texas has to report. And you'll see that from January to March of this year, in the city of Lubbock, they dispersed $2.8 million for these emergency rental assistance funds. So paying rent, that's a very sizable disbursement in those first 3 months. It served 716 people, so an average of 4,000 or so per household. In April, it picked up quite a bit, 1.4 million. In May, it slowed down significantly, 493,000, and in June, 614,000. One explanation for this, and I haven't spoken with the Community Development Department about it, may be that in these months, they're covering a lot of those extra months that you can be eligible for, and these may be or 1 month at a time kind of thing. But if you compare that to the way Lubbock County is and if you, I'll go back to the slide.
9? Is that, am I reading that correct? That Lubbock County's numbers are nine household servers.
So Lubbock County has $2.7 million to spend here. And in the entire year so far through June, we're looking at less than 40, well, almost 40 people. So not a lot of Lubbock County folks applying for these funds apparently, or being receiving these funds. And
yeah, just for some context, I don't know the Lubbock County number, but the city of Lubbock has about 110,000 households with a median household income that essentially would qualify for these.
Yeah.
And the idea that then at the county level that there are only 9, I'm stunned actually by this.
If you live in Lubbock, I think one of the big takeaways from this is funding is available.
Yeah, it's still there. It's still there. Yeah.
They were just at this neighborhood association meeting I was at just before the show, and they will help folks, just so folks out there know, they will help you with your identification. They'll work with you. If you're having some sort of issue with some of the forms of identification they require, if you need help in some other language outside of Spanish, they can, facilitate that. They'll help you fill out the forms. They'll pretty much help you do everything you need to do. And she did mention that pretty much everybody in Lubbock is going to qualify for this. So if you need help, don't hesitate to reach out to them.
Wow.
I imagine there are thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of households in Lubbock who could qualify but haven't.
Right.
So lots of resources there to benefit households and really, I think my estimation is that this funding source is really helping people who are already in housing most. By far, nationally, it seems these funds are being used by people who are in housing already, who are maybe at risk of failure to pay rent or eviction, and these are kind of helping them maintain housing that's already established. One little quick thing about Texas, if you look at Texas as a whole, you'll see the early part of this year was super slow. And if you follow Texas housers, if you kind of have heard some of the critique early on this year, there was a lot of criticism about how slow these dollars were rolling out. They have ramped up considerably with June, dispersing $306 million to 52,000 households. So enormous funding resource to keep people in housing. Another funding source that comes through the American Rescue Plan Act is the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. So nationally, this is $350 billion. It's also an enormous funding source. The city of Lubbock has received 60 million, Lubbock County 56 million. Y'all mentioned this earlier. And I don't know if you guys have read through the interim final rule about how these funds can be used, but there's an enormous amount of flexibility.
Right, a lot of it. Yeah.
And the process is super streamlined for localities to be able to determine how they want to use these funds, which is good and also really scary, as we know the likelihood of this going to pet projects and things that are not necessarily informed by the community and meeting needs within the community is a real risk to communities.
And I'll show my hand on this, in that I've previously advocated for the city to form a blue ribbon committee to oversee the stewarding of these dollars, so that the highest impact, highest need projects, as well as how to stimulate the Lubbock economy after COVID, that we really have a deliberative process to determine how they would go about. Now that was heard by the city council and ignored. And so instead, there will be a listening session that we had talked about a little bit earlier. But, as you mentioned, one of the challenges here, and this is not a critique of local government, but these dollars, these sums are beyond the guardrails that small communities like ours have when it comes to oversight and accountability. And these dollars at the federal level were intentionally not given a lot of additional guardrails because they wanted these dollars to be deployed quickly, which it seems like sometimes they weren't. And they wanted to make sure that communities could get these out to people in need as soon as possible. And sometimes, when those two ideas, when they merge in smaller size cities that don't have strong governance structures, a lot of not great or suboptimal decisions get made about how to use these dollars. So, yeah, no, I feel very strongly on this issue too. Yeah.
So I know y'all are, and I would just encourage anybody that's paying attention to any of this stuff to really follow what the funds are being used for and what they're going to be used for. And any chance we get to advocate for sensible uses of these funds, we need to do it. I think, there are mechanisms for communities to speak up when funds are misused, or that there's questions about self-dealing or anything like that comes up through these funds. And I hate to expect any of that from people, but like you said, the environment is kind of ripe for these kinds of problems. So it's going to deserve a lot of attention. Another funding source that is it may not seem very significant, but it really is nationally. You're looking at $5 billion compared to the last one, $350 billion. These are emergency housing choice vouchers. Kind of give some context. Local housing authorities, public housing authorities, they use housing choice vouchers to provide rental subsidies to low-income individuals, as well as people in homelessness. And these basically subsidize the cost of rent and utilities to help people who otherwise couldn't pay stay in private apartments, throughout the community. And this is, a lot of people, they know about Section 8. This is basically what Section 8 housing is today. If you're going to receive housing assistance, through a housing authority, it's most likely coming through a housing choice voucher. These are emergency housing choice vouchers through the American Rescue Plan Act that are really dedicated to people in homelessness, at risk of homelessness, fleeing domestic violence, state violence, sexual assault, stalking, or trafficking, or who have recently been homeless and have a high risk of housing instability. Lubbock Housing Authority has received 33 of these vouchers, which is fantastic because housing authorities had to accept these. These were allocated to housing authorities, but it wasn't a guarantee. They had to sign up and agree to receive them. And so thankful that Lubbock Housing Authority received these. And these are rolling out. This is happening right away. And I don't want to tell people call the housing authority to sign up for one of these. That's really not how these work, because anybody can apply for the housing wait list at the housing authority at any time. These are really kind of a side group of vouchers that are dedicated to this highly vulnerable group of people. And so you have the majority of vouchers just go to low income households who aren't necessarily in homelessness. That list still exists, although it's, I think, full right now. This kind of creates a new process for people in homelessness. So big resource. And if you go back and you look at the numbers from the point in time count, 33 households housed, and this is a long term. This doesn't just provide housing for a month. This can be a subsidy for decades. So somebody gets on one of these vouchers, it can be a life-changing thing moving forward. And 33 is a big portion of the people who experience homelessness in Lubbock on any given night. So that's a big one. Okay, so this is one of the last big ones that I want to mention, and I saved this for last because this is still kind of it's still in the wing waiting to be used, and that is the home ARP dollars that are coming through the Homeless Assistance and Supportive Services Program. So HOME is a HUD program that Lubbock receives through entitlement funding each year. And you'll see this little bar in the middle of the screen here. That is HUD funding that comes through for 2021, and it includes CDBG, HOME, and ESG, which are kind of normal. We receive those in any given regular year. What's new is the home ARP, which, if you see this on a typical year, we receive less than $1 million. This year we're receiving 3.6 million in one sum. And these can be used. TBRA is tenant-based rental assistance. So these can help individuals and households pay the rent, like these other sources. Can also and more commonly be used for the development and support of affordable housing. So that it can be acquisition and development. So buying property, renovating property, developing affordable housing. And with home ARP, there's guidance that is going to be coming out this fall that hasn't been released yet. So that's part of the reason why the City of Lubbock Community Development, who's managing this, and other groups around the country are waiting for that guidance before they decide what has to be done. But the Community Development Department will have to develop an action plan for spending this money and submit it before they actually do anything. So that's something to really pay attention to. The committee members on the Community Development and Services Board, this is going to be a very, very big deal. It has the potential to have a very positive impact in our community. It also has the potential to totally miss the mark and fund things that are not helpful. Or are subpar, that maybe they're going to be helpful to somebody, but we have not just us, but a lot of communities when it comes to homelessness and these HUD dollars, we have a tendency to miss what's called prioritization. So these funds are more likely to go to people who already have housing, who already have a lot more resources than people in shelters or unsheltered locations, even though HUD sets these up and gives prioritization to people in homelessness. And so sometimes these funds don't even get to the most vulnerable people in our communities because it's sometimes easier, or we're more inclined to, for whatever reason, give funds to people who already have housing. So
I'm happy that you brought, all these numbers, to the conversation, because, if you go back to that previous one and just sort of looking at, the total annual budget that the community development, that when it comes to CDBG and some of these other dollars, to have essentially a threefold injection of financing. And with each one of these programs, it sort of comes back to the fact that we as a community, because of the fact that we never see these types of dollars, this kind of infusion in our community, we don't have guardrails, right? Yep. We do not have structural processes and policy-making processes in the city that can deal with this, right? We don't have a way to think about these things strategically because of the fact that it is such large sums. And I think this really, each one of these, I think, just hammers home that point to a very strong degree.
Yeah, it is a critical time. And, if we've ever needed to increase our accountability and community communication about how these things should be done, it's now. It's like I said, it's just hard to compare this one year to the last decade of the amount of impact that can be made from these funding sources. So the following slides are taken from the National Alliance to End Homelessness, and I won't spend a lot of time here, but and I just encourage people, if this is something you're interested in, the National Alliance to End Homelessness, their website, endhomelessness.org, it's full of amazing information. And they really say this is what those home dollars and emergency housing vouchers should be prioritized for at the top, and what they shouldn't be prioritized for at the bottom. Unsheltered people, again, like we can't say enough, when we approach homelessness and housing, we need to approach it the way the healthcare system approaches health. The way an emergency room triages the people who walk through the door. If a person's walking in with a gunshot, they get rushed into the room. They're getting a lot of resources. If a person walks in with with a stomach ache, they're going to probably wait a minute and they're not going to be prioritized. We need to do the same thing with homelessness and prioritize people who are at the greatest risk of dying on the streets tonight. And this is kind of why unsheltered homelessness, people who are long-term shelter stayers, people who are chronically homeless, disabled, in need of permanent supportive housing, families with children under 6, pregnant women, and people over the age of 55. What we shouldn't be using these for is to prevent homelessness. And I'm going to get to that in just a second. But emergency rental assistance can be used for that. This rapid rehousing and people leaving non-congregate shelter, there are some other funding sources that can be used. That's why they're not kind of the priority for these funds. Don't use these for prevention. Preventing homelessness doesn't necessarily, or preventing evictions will not reduce homelessness, is what they say. And this is kind of a very, great slide with kind of a shorthand of it. And this slide views the impact on the homelessness system from diversion, homeless prevention, and eviction prevention, which are 3 very different things. In homeless services, diversion is about diverting people away from the homeless system before they enter it. So somebody shows up at a shelter and says, I just got kicked out of my mom's house and I don't have a place to stay tonight. Diversion is about figuring out how to get them right back into some kind of housing rather than entering the shelter. And homeless system funds can help there. We can have a high impact on homelessness by diverting people from the system. Homeless prevention, which is about giving support to extremely vulnerable people who are about to lose their housing. So people who are at imminent risk of losing their housing is kind of the way HUD frames it. We can have a medium impact, but really the lowest impact on the homeless system is what's called eviction prevention. And in terms of the emergency rental assistance program, I think that is the primary use that we're seeing right now and have been this for the last year. So helps people, sure. It doesn't necessarily impact homelessness because eviction is not, or risk of eviction is not necessarily going to result in homelessness. In fact, the majority of people who are evicted do not enter homelessness. They find some other kind of permanent housing. So, those are really important things and I hope and pray that the people making decisions about where this funding is going are considering those kinds of best practices for using these funds.
Right, and I think to point out just how clear these best practices are, right? In that the amount of work over decades in understanding what works and what doesn't in this space and what kind of interventions are appropriate, we're not lost here, right? We're not in the wilderness when it comes to knowing what works, what doesn't. And I think that's an important aspect in these conversations is to say, when we say best practices, we're not talking about something that somebody just came up with yesterday, right? We're talking about near universal consensus within a professional group of individuals who work within the space day in, day out for decades and have come to the realization that these are the types of priorities that make sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We know how to end homelessness. It's just a matter of making sure that the resources are used the most effective way, and that we prioritize and get the things done that are going to result in the kinds of impact and results that we're looking for. So last thing I'll say, and I'll kind of just turn it back over to y'all if there's any follow-up questions or anything else you want to talk about, is there is a question about eviction. The CDC Eviction Moratorium, there's been so many changes in all this and questions that I just want people to be clear that for Lubbock and Lubbock County, renters should not be at risk of eviction at least until October 3rd. And that's in part because the CDC's eviction moratorium basically says that if you're in a substantial or high COVID transmission area, which Lubbock definitely is,
Right.
Yeah.
that you have this moratorium, and it has to be outside of those substantial transmission levels for 14 days for it to go back into allowing an eviction. So that's kind of where we are now. I would recommend following Texas Housers to kind of keep an update on all of that. They're a really good resource. So.
Yeah, lots of good information. And we have just one more point. We had a comment by Kay Marie on Facebook. She says, just an FYI, here's some info from Disability Rights Texas regarding accommodations for people with disabilities who need housing or rental assistance due to COVID and the winter storms. And you can go to disabilityrightstx.org and look for the housing page. And there's some information for folks who may have disabilities and who may need some different accommodations to get some rental assistance. So yeah, it is 8 o'clock on the dot. We hit it right on the dot. Always good to chat with you, Chad, and lots of great information. I know we weren't able to touch on one subject that I know folks out there are worried about, but we will definitely have some information as that moves along. But we did cover a lot of stuff dealing with folks experiencing homelessness here in the city, a lot of good resources for folks if you are in need. And so please share the video with folks who may want to see it. And yeah, we'll have you on again for sure, Chad.
Yeah, no, what an absolute pleasure. And thank you for providing so much of that information. And I just sort of, I hope that everybody has an opportunity to look through the slides that you've been able to put together and this conversation about what's been happening behind the scenes, what's been going on when it comes to how these dollars have been allocated, and the challenges that we obviously have seen as a community. I'm still stunned by the 9 households served in Lubbock County for their allocation of those dollars. And, you know, and it's just, it's not to say that, you know, this is not a critique of individuals who are working in community development and are providing these services. It's just an acknowledgement that we are not accustomed to this amount of financing, and we don't have effective means to ensure that that we're good stewards of it. And so, and I think the way that you've laid all of this out today really just sort of drives that message home.
Yeah. Well, always a pleasure to be with you guys. You know, I'm sure that, you know, this stuff changes all the time. So, you know, stay up to date as you can. And, you know, I just encourage you. This is why it's important to tune into these things and why it's important to show up to city council meetings.
Yes.
And, you know, stay up to date in the ways that we can, because the only way Lubbock is going to make progress is if we give attention to the things that really need attention. So let's keep doing that.
Yeah. And, you know, that's what we push on this show each and every week. And the last thing I'll leave everybody with, I promise you, I'm going to say it every single week, join your neighborhood association. If you have one, if you do not have one in your area for whatever reason, please know that you can make one if you would like to do that. But join your neighborhood association and join us here every Wednesday at 7 o'clock like we always do. And we will see you all next time. Goodbye.